Okay, so this week we're going to address this topic, quality of democracy, and mainly quality of representation uh, in the post-neoliberal era after the decay of corporatism and delinking, this relationship between parties and trade unions, and how different political parties emerged in order to offer alternative representative avenues or civil society organizations in order to offer some sort of alternative space to articulate different interests, and how some parties manage to endure or to reorganize their relationships to social constituents, and others actually failed and disappeared from the political scene. So when we talk about representation, so political parties are the main electoral vehicles in order to represent different voters or different electoral constituencies, and articulating their demands and aggregating them into a broader program to be represented if they win and if they reach office. So basically, political parties in government, they supposedly in representative or liberal democratic paradigm, they should represent people in office or their electoral constituencies. So when they campaign on particular policy programs or platform, so they actually form some sort of shape, some sort of expectations about their actions, about their policies they will implement or they will take when they reach, or if they win and if they reach office. So by forming, this sort of expectations and campaigning on particular programs, and voters would cast a vote for this party or that party in order to represent them in office, meaning to transform. They voted for the program, so this program has to be transformed into actual public policies or actual decisions if they win and if they reach office. But what happened in Latin America, as we mentioned last week and the one before, it was some sort of political candidates campaigned on particular political platform, and then only just to switch it or to backtrack on these electoral promises when they assume office. So O'Donnell called this delegative democracy, which is different from representative democracy or liberal representation that like political leaders or presidents mainly campaigned on specific or creating some sort of expectations in their electoral campaigns, only just to reverse them after they reach office, because they know best. So everything will subject to their the personal whims. So they know best. So that's why they have to address all countries' problems, or to recover some sort of economic crisis, the way they see that this is the best way to go about it. So voters this way have to delegate all the power to presidents in order to take whatever decisions they see best or fit in order to overcome countries' basically economic problems in the post-neoliberal era. So this reversal of electoral promises, or this kind of relegation or marginalization of these electoral electoral programs, or what candidates actually campaigned on or promised in their electoral campaigns, was some sort of assertions and pronouncements. So they reversed when they reach office, mainly by implementing harsh austerity measures and deregulation and stabilization measures. So literature actually called this, or investigates this from different angles. As I mentioned, violent from psychological analysis, and prospect theory, like domain of gains and domain of losses. Roberts, when it comes to this kind of realignment and de-alignment, and how this would stabilize or destabilize the entire system. Lupo, he offered some sort of two-layered examination with the brand dilution and economic performance. And literature that's interested in the representation question, the scholars speak of some sort of quality of representation with regard to responding or representing, people's demands and concerns and worries in office, and translating their demands into actual policies. So some other studies actually broaden the scope a little bit, and they focused on not only these kind of electoral promises or reversal of electoral promises, or like bad economic performance. Some other issues actually helped reshape voters' perceptions, and eventually led to some sort of delinking or the detachment between voters and old or traditional political parties. Like the most important issues as well. So in addition to the bad economic performance, was some security issues as well. As we mentioned in Peru, like Shining Path, the guerrilla movement, it caused it actually they threatened civilian lives, and traditional parties were not able to give like or to root out the movement, or to have like a clear-cut stand towards violence against civilians. And corruption as well. As the literature mentioned, like in Venezuela, for example, like voters or citizens' perception of how corrupt the government or the traditional elites were, it was like magnifying conditions that accelerated the pace of the collapse of the two traditional political parties there. So it was like some sort of constellation of variables that led to the destabilization of the entire system. With some countries managed to move toward this kind of partisan realignment, with the emergence of new alternatives or new political parties, attracted or appealed to disaffected voters, and articulated new issues, and represented these concerns like security and corruption and this perception of economic inequality. And others actually, they didn't find this institutionalized channels to go through or to articulate their demands, and they resorted to the streets in order to vocalize their opposition. So some countries were rocked by different forms of contentious actions, like strikes, riots, and massive road blockades and mass demonstrations. So with some sort, but generally speaking, these processes of de-alignment with traditional parties accelerated or outpaced the processes of realignment with the new parties. With the partisan realignment, the Frente Amplio in Uruguay was like a case in point. Some sort of like the Labor Party as well helped in Brazil managed to institutionalize and stabilize the entire system in a way or another, while other countries like Venezuela, Bolivia, Peru, and Ecuador, populist leaders emerged in order to campaign on anti-establishment or anti-elitist platform, and they offered some sort of anti-neoliberal or anti-institutional alternative that attracted, wide masses or wide segments of these societies. But in other countries, like they followed a different path by in Argentina, as I mentioned last week, with the disappearance of the radicals, with the radical party there, Peronists managed to reach out to new constituents and new voters, and appeal to new classes by delinking or its relation to traditional trade unions. It actually acquired new electoral constituencies that helped the party to successfully readjust or adapt to the new circumstances or the new environment after the implementation of the adjustment and structural adjustment programs. So with countries like this, kind of de-alignment led to a total collapse of the party system and the emergence of new populist alternatives. Other countries, this kind of de-alignment like triggered or um, like offered voters with some institutionalized channel or other political parties, other space or other alternative avenues in order to represent disaffected or dissatisfied citizens as well, like what happened in Argentina and Brazil. Uh, so the quality of representation and the nature of representation was a key while investigating or examining thoroughly these processes of the reshaping the party system in the post-neoliberal era in Latin America. So we need to have like double focus on how political parties recast their linkages to social constituents or to their citizens, and whether or not the existing civil society organizations or associations, they offer some sort of representative functions, um, uh, and how they offer this representative function. Would they claim that they have like they offer some alternative path of representation to the political parties, or they might reach out to the existing or the new political parties to have this kind of to offer some sort of alliance and some sort of social support and social basis for the new parties in order to reach power. So it depends on the party linkages to citizens on the one hand, and on the other hand, the representative functions and of the civil society organizations, whether they actually they rejected the political process or the entire political establishment, or they might have some sort of negotiation with the existing power centers in order to stabilize the entire regime. And like the literature called this Hostetler and Friedman, actually referring to the emergence of mass demonstrations as like or the street as the new poder moderador. It's how they actually moderate, or they check on they offered some sort of social power in order to hold politicians accountable for their policies or for any wrongdoing, especially by taking to the streets in order to support the impeachment of several presidents in Latin America. So when we talk about this quality of representation, so we need to focus on like the linkages of political parties, what kind of bonds these political parties and what kind of tie these political parties establish to their electoral constituencies, and the existing civil society, whether or not they offer some sort of anti-systemic forces or veto players that rejected the political establishment or the political process altogether, and they offered alternative avenue or alternative path to the existing political dynamics, as it happened in Bolivia, or um, somehow like, or somewhere in between, rejecting existing government while not eliminating or asking for the entire collapse of the existing political class, as it happened in Argentina after 2001. And like in between, there is Brazilian case as well, with the Labour Party actually managed to distance itself from social basis with Lula da Silva actually reached power in 2003, and actually delinking, this or carving out, space or asserting the autonomy of the executive in relation to the party. So that's why he managed to offer to get some sort of autonomy in relation to his party. So that's why he proceeded with some sort of neoliberal reform or policies, and detached the executive or power centers from party social basis. And that's why, but the civil society there, or the organization there, were too fragmented to push for radical redistributive policies, or to articulate some sort of radical redistributional demands. So we investigate in some detail, these three cases, how political parties managed to reestablish or to rearrange their linkages to social basis or to electoral constituencies. With the Peronist Party, the internal organization and the clever leadership managed to appeal to new voters and new new social forces that managed to restabilize the entire system and asserted endurance of Peronism in the political scene there. And in Bolivia, the movement to socialism and Evo Morales, they actually campaigned on anti-elitist discourses that led to the entire collapse of the existing party system, and articulating different kind of political discourse and reshaping, the political landscape and the political arena differently. And it actually represented a rupture from the past political performance or the past political dynamics since the return of democracy in the early 80s. And then the Workers' Party in Brazil, and how the fragmentation of civil society organizations and this kind of reorganization or re-establishment or streamlining, the linkage between the Labor Party and its social basis helped to stabilize the entire system with some sort of low quality of representation, especially under Lula's rule, or under the Labor Party Dilma as well. So we start with Argentina. So as I mentioned last week, was after LaAm, he campaigned on this populist platform, and he proceeded with this neoliberal reforms and managed actually with some sort of good economic performance, or the perception of citizens about his government's performance in office helped him to get re-elected. And then the radicals in alliance with Frapasso managed to reach power in 1999 with Fernando de la Rua in office, but he proceeded as well with some drastic economic measures that triggered wide social opposition. So what happened in 2001? People took to the streets in order to overthrow De La Rua's government. And it was like a catchphrase that became widely known and inspired different opposition movements and different social movements to ask for or to do the same in order to topple neoliberal incumbents or to remove them from power. So people took the streets under this banner of Que se vayan todos, it's throw them all out, referring to the neoliberal or this kind of neoliberal elites or the neoliberal political class in 2001. And it was actually the movement to draw together piqueteros. It was unemployment movements and informal sector, but it actually gathered as well some middle class elements and forces like human rights advocates and progressive intellectuals joined the movement in order to ask for the removal of De La Rua, and not only pushing for social and economic demands for unemployed forces or informal sector, but also to ask for some institutional reform by asking for the judicial reform and asking for investigation, open and transparent investigation against old human rights violation committed by the military junta. So by the time of the election in 2003, only 30% of the according to survey data, respondents, actually only 3% they showed some sort of affiliation with the traditional political parties, include Peronism and radicals, but radicals actually showed some sort of significant decline in partisan identification. Only 5% said that they were identified or affiliated with they felt they had some sort of belonging to the radicals. But eventually, this kind of mass protest and massive movements, it didn't lead to like entire replacement of the political class. So the crisis led to some sort of institutional adaptation of the Peronism, or the Peronist party, that managed to re-equilibrate or managed to restore its balance after, or in order to stabilize the entire system and to keep it from entire collapse. So by 2003, the party from within was in a total disarray, or it had like fragmentation, that party leaders or the main figures, they didn't even agree on one particular candidate. So the Peronists had like 3 candidates in 2003 elections, and actually the main factions were actually between like LaAm and his center right position, and Kirchner with his effort of pulling the party to the left as well, in order to keep the party brand, or to have like the same to keep this Peronist category attached to left-leaning policies. So in order to investigate or to examine how how the party actually managed to face this crisis, and to fare like well at mitigating or adapting to this like intense crisis, and managed to restore its balance, and how Kirchner actually managed to renew the party, and to make it appeal to new social constituents. So Levitsky focused mainly on the internal organizations, and how like organizational strength but weakness or institutional weakness offered the party some room of it gave the party some room to adapt or to adjust quickly to the crisis, and managed to restore its balance in a way or another after this like mass protest and mass demonstrations. So generally speaking, the party from within, one of the main feature is this kind of institutional, back then or until like 2003, was like institutional fluidity was like one of the main organizational or institutional feature of the Peronist party. So the party didn't have this kind of strict hierarchy, or like stable rules and norms that define the process of nomination, or how to nominate, how to select candidates, how to nominate candidates, how some political actors would elevate in its ranks. The party didn't have this kind of a strict hierarchy as, for example, the PRI in Mexico. So the party had some sort of ad hoc rules in order to respond or to resolve some disputes or conflicts within the party. So the central committee or the national council didn't have like great power in decision making, and this was actually inherited from Juan Perón, that that actually the party, or it had as the main figure, or the founder of the party, had like a great power over decision making process. So the party didn't have some sort of written or strict rules in order to nominate its candidates, or in order to control the career path of the politicians that actually affiliated with the party. Even like when the party invented some sort of primaries in provinces, the procedure was highly contested in these provinces, and the process was circumvented. Like some party branches actually neglected this nomination process, and they proceeded with the same loose institutional structure. And even like when the party it had the party had this kind of deep-rooted linkages to trade unions and labor movement. But unlike Venezuela, for example, the labor confederation, they had like some sort of organizational existence. Institutionally speaking, they had like a bureau inside the Democratic Action Party. So unlike Venezuela, like the trade unions, they didn't have some sort of formal organizational structure inside the Peronist party. And unlike other like labor parties, that they have like some sort of codified rules that like say that this kind of block vote in the part in the party congress, the party leadership or the party congress didn't have some sort of reserved block vote for labor unions or for unionists, for example. So they had some sort of informal rules that were never codified into internal bylaws or the internal rules or organizational structure inside the Peronist party. So they had like this 62 organization that it was mainly served as the labor like the labor branch in order to represent the trade unions or the labor movement um, inside in the leadership, in order to have some sort of nomination to some post or some political post or some partisan post. But it was like kind of informal, and it didn't have any sort of like official or formal budget or like formal rules or formal procedures and regulations that would say like this nomination process, like trade unions would have like 3 or 4 representatives in this post or in that post. And even when it comes to like the representation in the party congress as well, they had like this informal or unwritten rule, tercio, mainly like reserving or preserving, like a third of party post and party candidates actually to trade unions or to unionists. But it was actually it was not like written into like formal rule, so that's why it was never rigorously enforced, and it was easily for party leadership to get around this, and never give like 1/3 of posts and party candidates to unionists or trade unions. So when it comes to this kind of like the strict hierarchy or centralized hierarchical structure and formal or strict rules and norms and regulations, the party has been institutionally fluid and institutionally weak in a sense. So it had some room for maneuvering or some sort of institutional malleability and flexibility in order to face, in addition to the vulnerability to crisis, this kind of institutional fluidity and institutional weakness gave the party as well some sort of ample room for maneuvering and to get around or to de-link its flexibility with delinking relations to trade unions, and to give as well like the leadership enjoyed some degree of autonomy or strategic autonomy because of this kind of legacy of the role of the founding leader Juan Boron. As I mentioned, the party didn't offer some sort of strict rules or long formal process politicians had to go through in order to get to high ranks inside the party. So there is no kind of tenure security in leadership position. As Levitsky mentioned, anyone can like join the party and get to its like high ranks without going through any sort of long career path or long institutional process in order to reach this high position. So this offered some room, some strategic autonomy to leadership in order to respond to crisis, in order to implement some sort of unpopular policies as well. So this enabled Menam as well to campaign on this populist platform, as I mentioned last 2 weeks. He campaigned on this populist platform with some vague signals regarding social and economic policies. And actually, it had, before even implementing, these policies, and before reaching power in 1989, the party went through this renovation process. These kind of institutional weakness or fluidity helped the party to renew itself from within, with some degree of some autonomous space for leadership to implement these renovationist policies, and to evade any sort of strict hierarchical structure. So this kind of renovation processes help the party to reorganize its linkages to traditional electoral constituencies by transforming the party from like a labor-based party to patronage machines, by re-establishing or actually rebasing its um, party organizational branches on these kind of clientelistic machines, and establishing extensive organizational networks in different provinces based on these clientelistic, by offering or distributing some material benefits to rural poor, for example, in order to attract them or to build support base among these electoral or like the segment, this social segment, or this social class. So by establishing this kind of extensive grassroots organizations, and having some local brokers in order to recast the relationship between different electoral constituencies to party, and appealing to rural poor and middle class voters and informal sectors. So the party transformed itself from labor-based party to patronage machines, and actually appealed or attracted new constituents. So the bad or the negative side was this institutional fluidity or institutional weakness that made the party much more vulnerable to economic and political crisis, but at the same time it offered some space or like on the positive side, it offered some space for the party in order to have a autonomous leadership with ample strategic room for maneuvering. So this created what was called bandwagoning effect. So the party, as there is no kind of secure career path inside the party, and there is no strict nomination process, so any kind of internal factions, when they appear, or when they surface, so the winning the factors, or the some sort of internal factions or internal competitors, when they got defeated, so they would join the winning faction in order to preserve their position inside the party. And this happened when Menam actually decided to make this move to the right. So his faction actually obviously won. So that's why the defeated faction actually bandwagoned with Minam in order to secure their position inside the party. And he managed actually to attract, with the existence of some internal opposition, but generally speaking, some internal factions actually joined Menam and supported his policies in Congress and inside the party as well. And it offered, the leadership some degree, like office holders, they had some degree of autonomy and political autonomy from the party hierarchy. So there is no written rule or norm would stipulate that the executive would be responsible or accountable to the party hierarchy. So there is kind of some sort of autonomous space between the party in the executive and the organizational hierarchy or the organizational structure of the party itself. So he attracted some sort of urban poor, middle class voters and informal sectors from working class as well, that they actually didn't have any sort of organizational apparatus or they are not affiliated to trade unions, so they lack any sort of organizational basis. So he attracted Peronist party, MINAM and Peronist party managed to attract or to appeal to the informal workers as well in order to expand or to broaden its support base. So now the party based its support on heterogeneous social strata, and they had like this kind of extensive grassroots networks and organizations that actually did spread across the country. So this enabled the party through recasting its relationships to citizens or restructuring this along clientelistic machines or patronage network. So this actually enabled the party to tighten its control over these social constituents, because and to get their votes as well. So in order to make use of the material benefits or the benefits the party distributed to electoral constituencies, so these social classes or these social segments, they had to show some degree of compliance and some degree of consent to the party leaders and to the party policies. And it actually helped the party to diffuse by having these local brokers and these local and grassroots networks. So the party managed actually to diffuse any kind of rising social protest. It actually immuned the party to any sort of radical and political transformation. So this is like looking into the organizational structure or the institutional fluidity or institutional weakness of the Peronist party, and how it offered some sort of flexibility in order, or some room for movement to party leaders in order to recast or to reorganize its relationships or its bonds to social actors. But actually, like the personality or of Kirchner as well, and how he dealt with as like he offered some sort of astute leadership to the party by dealing with the 2001 crisis. He actually appealed to, or he had some sort of established some sort of deliberation space, or offered some deliberation space to human rights advocates and progressive intellectuals, and even segments of unemployed workers, in order to respond to their demands and to offer some sort of concessions in order to demobilize the movement. So actually, by responding and offering some concessions to protesters, by like promising and pushing for some institutional and judicial reform, prosecution of some military figures that committed human rights violations in the military period, during the military period, and offering some and promising and actually taking decisions with regard to offering subsidies and some social policies and some social spending in order to respond to these people's demands. He actually fragmented, this unemployed movement, and he created, some sort of division inside the movement by with some factions or some groups agreeing to have some sort of conversation and dialogue with the government, and others wanted to proceed, with the radical or anarchist policies. So he actually fragmented, this by offering some concessions, co-opting, some leaders, and isolating, radical factions. He actually managed to fragment, these kind of protest movements, and reassure the position of the Peronist party as a representative of these wide electoral constituencies, and offered, the renewed, the Peronism, and attract and pull the party towards the, this left-leaning policies again. So, like, on the one hand, the party successfully adapted to the new environment, or to respond successfully to the crisis with the help of this internal organizational structure. And on the other hand, there were no forces inside, like, civil society organizations that actually offered themselves as an alternative to the existing political class. So although there were some radical demands, and some sort of radical forces, that they rejected, channeling any kind of demands through institutionalized channels. But Kirchner actually fragmented, these movements, and this kind of fragmentation prevented the emergence of one coherent movement or one coherent political force to present itself as an alternative representation to the existing political class. So that's why he reached out to non-traditional constituents, and he managed to renew the party from within, and to have like different kind of to form different kind of alliance, and to reach out to different allies in order to cement or to foster his the party existence and power. And he managed actually, the Peronist managed to sustain the presence or the existence of the Peronist party in the political scene, unlike the radical or the civic radicals that actually disappeared from the political scene in Argentina after 2003. Bolivia offered like some sort of extreme example, as it happened in Venezuela as well. But with the entire collapse of the party system and the disappearance of the three traditional political parties, and the emergence of Evo Morales is here in the picture. So he actually he actually made use of this indigenous culture, and he made these kind of cultural claims in order to appeal to disaffected indigenous movements, and he appealed to these or his movement to socialism actually appealed to these wide mass constituents in order that enabled him to reach power in 2005, and actually putting an end to the three traditional political parties there. Like briefly, with the implementation of neoliberal reforms, with this kind of policy switch or this kind of de-alignment happened with the National Revolutionary Movement, the MNR. It was actually had this revolutionary thrust from 1952 as a representative of peasants and workers, and it actually pushed for this far-reaching redistributive measures and land reform in order to have or to build its support base amongst the peasants and working class. So what happened with the neoliberal turn, and when the economic crisis hit hard, so the MNR made this switch to the right, and implemented and transformed itself into a conservative force, and implemented the harsh, the drastic, reform or the harsh austerity measures and deregulation programs under Path Estenssoro in 1985 until 1989. And then what happened after him from the leftist revolutionary movement, Zamoro actually implemented or proceeded further with these neoliberal reforms, and they had to harshly crack down on protesters and workers in order to go ahead and to proceed with the neoliberal reforms. So the MNR and the leftist revolutionary movement, MIR, and then the National Democratic Action, AND, with its candidate Banzer Suarez in 1997 until 2002, they actually intensified and deepened the economic reform measures in Bolivia, despite the fact that they faced some sort of workers' mobilization and indigenous mobilization starting from the 90s. So the three parties in 1985, they gained roughly 73.5% of the national vote. And And the crisis, started to unfold in 2002, and the three parties got like 42% of the national vote. Um, and like eventually or gradually in 2005, the AND and MIR totally disappeared, and only MNR gained 5% of the national vote, and that was like the election that brought Evo Morales to power. So Evo Morales, he was not totally outsider, because he actually elected to the parliament in 1998, and he actually appealed to some sort of mobilizable constituents, um, by like inside the parliament, blocking and opposing, the government policies, neoliberal policies, and basically the program of eradicating coca, or the coca eradication in Bolivia. So he actually presided over the Confederation of the Coca Growers, and he presented himself as one from um, like from the indigenous people, is representative of their claims, and he actually used this cultural roots of coca growers and framed it culturally, in addition to some material demands, in order to attract more supporters and more following, that the process actually culminated into like his victory, electoral victory in 2005. But before, like it was like a gradual process of detachment or party system collapsed there. So the indigenous movement in the highlands, especially like peasants, they actually started to ask for some sort of gradual reform. They asked for land reforms or land appropriation, and some sort of assertion of their cultural dignity. But with the privatization measures, and some workers actually got fired, and they made their way to, or they actually, when they were removed from the industrial sectors, so they found some sort of, they resorted to this coca growing sector in order to secure their livelihood or to their economic survival. So with the US sponsored program, as a part and parcel of this neoliberal reform measures, Zero Coca program sponsored by the United States, it actually triggered fierce resistance from indigenous people and from the highland movement or indigenous movements. The process actually escalated with the intensification or the deepening of the privatization measure, when the government decided to privatize water utilities in Cochabamba and the hydrocarbon sectors as well. So the government started to subsidize only 50% of the water supply in the city, and left the remaining percentage to cooperatives and private companies. So this actually triggered vehement resistance from people there, that actually talked to the streets in order to articulate or to vocalize their opposition to the government's decision of the privatization of water. And it was called or known as water war in Cochabamba in 2002. And here the slogan, like the El agua is nuestra, so the water is ours. So they asked the government to not to privatize or not to proceed with the privatization of water utilities in order to let them live. So that was actually under Banzer Suarez administration, and then it was like within this polarized context or environment. Sanchez de Lozado came again or voted again into office, and he actually proceeded again with this privatization measures, and he he actually he decided, to privatize the hydrocarbons sector, especially, the gas sector, and this triggered massive demonstrations again against his decision of privatization, and offering some sort of concessions to foreign companies in order to export gas to foreign countries, by offering some concessions to multinational corporations, and that was considered kind of expropriation of natural resources in Bolivia, and that's why people took to the streets in order to oppose the government decision of privatization. So what added or complicated the situation even more, that his administration or the government decided to push for or further for coca eradication policies. So this triggered like rights looting activities that actually ended up with the resignation, or forcing actually Luzado to resign and to leave office. Mesa actually followed him, and he had to hold a referendum in order to privatize the hydrocarbon sectors. And this actually, this referendum as well, didn't stabilize the social landscape, or didn't put an end to the social polarization process, but it actually triggered even more social opposition that led to his resignation as well after all. What happened, it was like these three parties throughout this period tried to form some sort of contingent alliance with the, like, either the MNR and MIR, with the AND and other indigenous and newly emerging political parties, in order to secure some sort of majority inside the parliament, in order to proceed or to pass the government agenda. So these kind of with these kind of social upheaval and the emerging or intensive social protests and social mobilizations, some political allies started to defect, and this eventually led to the resignation of like two presidents, and it was like a total chaotic atmosphere. Within this atmosphere, actually, Evo Morales and his movement emerged as a representative of the coca growers and indigenous in highlands, but the social landscape was far from it was not that united, and it was totally heterogeneous, social landscape. So while like left-leaning movement to socialism and Evo Morales movement, and he tried to mobilize some dissatisfied sectors, indigenous sectors in highlands. Some other conservative and counter mobilizations actually were going on, with the asking for, but they had like different set of demands. So they asked for preservation of property rights. They needed to block, any kind of redistributive policies, and they even asked for some sort of regional autonomy, especially in the lowland states. So they formed their civic committees in order to push for their own demands, and they were far from like representative of like low classes demands. And it was very difficult as well to form like cross-class alliance, with rural unions or some workers joined in, and they asked for totally different demands in order to meet their material demands. So they exerted some sort of pressures in order to push for their own demands, that actually they were at odds with the indigenous demands as well. So this kind of fragmented any sort of cross-class alliance between rural unions and the indigenous elsewhere. And in this context, movement to socialism emerged as kind of unified party, or movement transformed into a party, in order to represent indigenous people, in order to represent these kind of disgruntled sectors. And in Congress as well, with these three parties never gained some sort of majority that enabled them in order to pass their their policy agenda or their political programs. So the existence of some political parties represented, including the movement to socialism, they actually represented, different other sectors, and they refused, they claimed some sort of representation that refused the representative institutions altogether. So they actually presented themselves or exposed themselves as veto players or anti-system parties that refuse to have any kind of alliance or any kind of negotiation or a dialogue with the existing political establishment. So stiffening like this parliamentary opposition with the fragmentation or the deepening polarization or heightening, this social polarization between different elements of this popular sector, like trade unions or rural unions and indigenous people, and between right wingers and left wingers, mobilization and counter mobilization for regional autonomy. So the political landscape was totally chaotic, and it was totally heterogeneous. So it was very difficult to for like a particular party from within the existing establishment to stabilize the entire system. So with this social landscape and this deepening polarization, some forces inside like the civil society associations, they claimed, they offered different avenue or alternative avenues, or they claimed some representative functions that actually rejected or repudiated the existing political establishment. So in this context, actually, the movement towards socialism won the parliamentary elections in 2005, and actually it gained nearly 50% of the 54% of the national vote. And Podemos, it was like representative, the largest actually opposition movement that actually represented the right. It gained 29% of the national vote. And before that point, it was like indigenous people and indigenous movements, and these mobilization and counter mobilizations, they actually pushed for some constitutional and electoral reforms. So that's why the Evo Morales and the movement to socialism had to deal with the question of the constitutional reform by formation of this the electing constituent assembly. By electing this constituent assembly, actually the MSA gained as well more than the half of the seats, 53.5% of the seats, but as well, like Podemos gained 15% of the vote and gained 23.5% of the national of the seats, the seats of the Constituent Assembly. So that's why. But the problem here, he gained majority, Morales and his movement, but he needed some sort of approachment and some sort of a deal with Podemos in order to secure the 2/3 majority in order to pass for or to write the new constitution and to promulgate or to pass the new constitution from the parliament. We will talk more about the indigenous movement and Evo Morales administration after reaching power next week. But for now, it's kind of how political parties managed or didn't manage to reestablish or to reorganize its linkage, the linkages to social constituents was a crucial factor. And the existence or the non-existence of radical forces or alternative forces in civil society organizations that actually claimed representative functions and presented themselves as an alternative, a viable alternative to the existing political establishment, it actually fed into the process of the collapse of the entire party system and the emergence of Evo Morales or the MSA as like a new party movement turned into a party to reach power and to put an end to the traditional three parts there amid like total collapse of the party system in Bolivia. The Workers' Party in Brazil. So with the impeachment, I referred to this before, of Coyer, after the implementation of this neoliberal policies, it was like, since the decompression plan and the departure of the military or like from the political scene, it was like totally a underperforming period. It was like marked by partisan instability and political instability between 1995 until 1993. And then when uh, like the Social Democratic Party in Brazil, led by Enrique Cardoso, reached a deal or formed some sort of informal coalition or informal deal with the Labor Party. They both, Lula da Silva and Cardoso, managed to stabilize the entire political system, or and created actually this by coalitional arc with the Labor Party and the Cardoso Social Democratic Party. So what happened? The government party didn't gain like throughout the 90s, since the mid 90s. It didn't gain, the majority in the parliament. So that's why it had the Cardoso had to have a deal, to strike a deal with the opposition led by the Labour Party, that gained from 25 to 30% of the seats between 1995 until 2002, until Lula actually assumed power. So that's why Cardoso and Lula had to reach some sort of a deal in order to stabilize the political system and to neutralize the military and put an end to this military intervention in politics. And they actually made like great strides in subordinating the military to the civilian rule. And they have this unwritten or informal rule, the literature called coalitional, I think Powell called coalitional presidentialism. So the thrust or the substance of this is it's a power sharing agreement or a power sharing deal. As a government, they didn't have the majority inside the parliament or the legislature, so it had to reach a deal with the opposition in order to pass its policy agenda and to guarantee or to prevent any kind of blocking to its policies or its agenda. So that's why the government offered some sort of ministerial posts to the opposition. So it was like multi-party cabinet, forming multi-party cabinet, and agreeing to fashion or to design some sort of voting blocks in the legislature in order to guarantee the passage of the government policies or the government agenda. So what happened under Lula? He actually managed to detach. He assured some degree of executive autonomy in relation to the party structure or the party hierarchy. So this led to a dissociation between the executive and the support basis of the Labour Party. And for some, like the Labour Party or the Lula, after having reached power, he actually represented. Like the bourgeoisie class rather than the labor class in power. He actually proceeded with the neoliberal reforms, as he promised that he would actually continue with Cardoso's economic programs, and the Labour Party, in order to humanize, to offer some sort of humanitarian face, or to add this face to neoliberal reform measures. So the party actually expanded social spending on poverty alleviation programs or policies, especially conditional cash transfers, in order to support single mothers or people in extreme poverty, by offering, some sort of material benefits or material support to them in order to buy like the basic goods, or to send their kids or children to schools. So this led to some sort of like defections from the Labour Party with the PSOL, Socialism and Liberty Party, and some sort of emerging or mounting resistance within civil society associations and within the Labour Party and the Lula's previous support base. But instead of like presenting themselves as an alternative to the existing, political parties or to the existing political establishment, they actually pushed for some sort of reform proposals from within the existing system, or playing within the same rules of the game. So there was kind of explanation for this, like by recasting, the party linkages to social basis and demobilizing in a way or another, or actually muting, this kind of radical programs or radical reforms to bubble up, preventing this actually from the start, to emerge. So the organizations themselves were by and large fragmented, so they didn't have the organizational capacity to push for these radical and far-reaching distributive policies or radical policies that would disturb the balance of power between different classes, that actually before led to the breakdown of democracy and the military intervention in politics. So this actually, as Violet mentioned, it was this kind of fragmentation. It actually put politicians at ease that they didn't have any sort of pressure in order to proceed with this far-reaching redistributive programs. So they didn't have the capacity to push for this to start with, and they didn't have the capacity to offer themselves as an alternative, as an to the government, or as a alternative ruler, or to represent different kind of representative functions to the existing political parties or existing political establishment. So this actually stabilized the system in a way or another, but was some sort of low quality of representation. But this low quality of representation didn't lead to entire collapse of the system, because of the not only the linkages to social classes that actually de-radicalized them, but as well, like this fragmentation of civil society organizations and the representative functions, like monitoring government, like pushing for some sort of articulating some sort of demands and aggregating them into a coherent reform proposal in order to pressure the government. They proceeded through institutionalized channels, rather than, despite the fact that they might result to contentious or non-conventional politics, like demonstrations and strikes and riots, but still they didn't reject, the entire political class. So this stabilized the political system, and actually the Labour Party stayed in power even after Lula, until Delma Russell actually got impeached in 2016 because of this breaching of financial laws, by misusing, some sort of public funds in order to finance her electoral campaign in 2014. But actually, the image of the party got distorted, and this led to some sort of detachment between social basis and the political party itself, that gave way to far right of Bolsonaro to reach power last year. But still, like some sort of the existing political parties or the existing elite coalitions managed to stabilize the entire party system, and no like civil society, there is no kind of radical movement within civil society organizations that claimed rights to representation of different social classes, that put an end to the traditional political parties, basically the Labour Party, especially after this dissociation after they happened between the party and the social basis. So recasting, these linkages to society and adapting to the new environment of governability and the fragmentation of civil society organizations, it led to the endurance or the stability of the entire system, and precluded the emergence of until Bolsonaro reached power, fended off, this kind of populist claims and redistributive radical measures, as it happened in Venezuela and Bolivia and Ecuador. And we will talk about Ecuador next week. And next lecture, we are going to talk about different, adaptation strategies of different political parties that managed to stabilize the entire party system and keep the party system from collapsing. So that's all for today, and see you next lecture. Bye.